The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto my kitchen counter. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. My mother's words echoed in my head. "We're disappointed in you, Olivia. We've decided to transfer everything to your brother. He's the only one who truly understands family loyalty. 15 years. For 15 years, I had paid their mortgage, funded their vacations, covered their medical bills, and even bought them a new car every 3 years, all while building my own law career from nothing. And my brother, Michael? He hadn't contributed a dime. Not once in those 15 years had he offered anything beyond occasional visits where he'd charm them with grand stories of his upcoming business ventures." I sank into my chair, my hands trembling. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't about the money. I had my own successful practice now. It was about the years of sacrifice. The promotions I'd turned down because they required moving away from my parents. The vacations I never took because that money went to theirs instead. The relationship that had fallen apart because I was always rushing to help them with something. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother and I have finalized everything today. Michael will be handling our affairs from now on. We expect you to transfer any remaining documents to him by the end of the week." That's when something inside me snapped. The dutiful daughter they had manipulated for years disappeared, and in her place stood the corporate attorney who had built a reputation for being meticulous and unforgiving when crossed. My hands stopped shaking. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I opened my laptop and navigated to my firm's system. As their legal representative for over a decade, I had access to everything: their trusts, their accounts, their property deeds. Everything they'd just transferred to Michael was still legally connected to my signature in dozens of ways they didn't understand. "So be it," I whispered to myself, beginning to type. My relationship with my parents hadn't always been this complicated. Growing up, we were what most people would consider a normal middle-class family. My father worked as a bank manager, and my mother taught at the local elementary school. We lived comfortably enough, and I never wanted for necessities. Michael came along when I was 6, and from the beginning, there was something different about how they treated him. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, help around the house, and generally behave like a miniature adult, Michael was allowed to simply exist. His mediocre performance in school was met with encouragement rather than the disappointment I would have faced. His messes were cleaned up without complaint. Even when he started getting into trouble as a teenager, staying out past curfew, hanging with a questionable crowd, my parents would shrug it off as boys being boys. I compensated by becoming even more perfect. Valedictorian, full academic scholarship to college, early admission to law school. I worked part-time jobs throughout it all, determined to be self-sufficient. I thought my achievements would finally make them see me, really see me. Then, during my second year of law school, my father had a heart attack. It wasn't severe, but it was enough to force early retirement. Their financial situation changed overnight. My mother stopped teaching to care for him, and suddenly, their comfortable nest egg didn't look so secure. Their medical insurance only covered so much, and the pension wasn't what they had expected. That's when I stepped in. At first, it was just helping with some medical bills while I finished law school. I lived on ramen and coffee so I could send them a few $100s each month. Michael, who had dropped out of community college by then, was living at home rent-free, supposedly finding himself. I didn't complain. Family helps family. That's what I believed. After graduation, I landed a position at a mid-size firm specializing in corporate law. The money was good, especially for a new attorney, and I immediately started covering more of my parents' expenses. Their mortgage was the first thing I took over completely. Then it was property taxes, utilities, and eventually, even their groceries and personal expenses. "It's just until your father's health improves," my mother would say. "Just until Michael gets on his feet with his business." Michael's business changed every few months. App development, drop shipping, cryptocurrency trading. None of it ever produced a dime of actual income, but my parents spoke about each new venture as if it were going to make him the next tech billionaire. Meanwhile, I was working 70-hour weeks, climbing the ranks at my firm, and transferring nearly half my income to them each month. Friends would ask me why I did it, why I didn't demand that my brother contribute or that my parents downsize from their 4-bedroom house to something more manageable. The truth was complicated. Part of it was genuine concern for their well-being. Part of it was the hope that, eventually, they would see my sacrifices and value them, value me. And part of it, a part I hardly admitted to myself, was fear. Fear that if I stopped being useful, I would lose what little love and approval they gave me. Years passed this way. I made partner at 32, one of the youngest in my firm's history. The financial burden of supporting my parents became less noticeable as my income grew, but the emotional weight never lessened. Every time I called, they would spend most of the conversation talking about Michael's latest scheme, or asking when I would visit. Never mind that I sent flowers on birthdays, gifts on holidays, and checks year-round. Then, 3 days ago, everything changed. I received a call from my mother, her voice unusually cold. "Your father and I have been talking, Olivia. We're concerned about the path you've chosen." I remember laughing, thinking it was some kind of joke. "The path I've chosen? You mean becoming a successful attorney and taking care of you and Dad for the past 15 years? "That's exactly what we mean," she replied, and I could hear the displeasure in her tone. "You've become so materialistic. All you care about is work and money. When was the last time you came home for Sunday dinner? When was the last time you called just to chat, not to discuss some bill or account?" I was stunned into silence. Yes, my visits had become less frequent over the years. It's hard to make weekly family dinners when you're working on major corporate acquisitions, but I called regularly, and I was always there when they truly needed me. "Michael has been such a comfort to us," she continued. "He understands what's important in life. He makes time for family." Of course he did. Michael had nothing but time. He lived in their guest house, drove a car I had paid for, and as far as I knew, still had no actual income. "Mom," I said carefully, "I understand that my schedule can be demanding, but I've always prioritized making sure you and Dad are taken care of." Being taken care of isn't just about money, Olivia. It's about connection, presence. Michael gives us that, and we've decided that he's the one who should handle our affairs going forward. That's when she dropped the bomb about transferring everything to him. All the assets I had helped maintain or outright purchased, all the accounts I had carefully managed, everything. As if the past 15 years of my support meant nothing. I spent that first night in shock, lying awake and replaying every interaction, trying to understand where I had gone so wrong. By morning, shock had given way to anger. By the time my father texted me about transferring documents, anger had crystallized into resolve. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted to cut me off because I was too focused on money and legal matters, yet they had no problem benefiting from exactly those skills for years. Well, they were about to learn just how skilled I really was. I made 2 phone calls that night. The first was to my colleague Stephanie, who specialized in family law. "They can't just transfer everything to your brother if you've been financially supporting them all these years," she assured me after I explained the situation. "Especially if any of those assets are in your name or were purchased with your funds. We can file for an emergency injunction to freeze everything until we sort out what's legally yours." The second call was to my friend James, a forensic accountant. "I need a complete financial history," I told him. "Every penny I've given them for the past 15 years, every asset purchased, every bill paid, all of it documented and certified." "That's extensive," he replied cautiously. "Are you sure you want to go down this road with your family?" "They're the ones who chose this road," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. I'm just making sure they understand where it leads. Over the next 72 hours, I barely slept. James worked miracles, combing through my financial records and creating a comprehensive report that detailed my contributions. $872,145 over 15 years, not including non-monetary support like serving as their legal representative or the career opportunities I had sacrificed. Stephanie prepared the necessary legal documents for an emergency hearing. I kept waiting for doubt to creep in, for the dutiful daughter to resurface and tell me I was making a terrible mistake. But each time my resolve wavered, I would remember my mother's cold dismissal, my father's demanding text, and all the years I had given them while receiving so little in return. The decisive moment came when my brother called, his voice smug. "Hey, sis, Mom and Dad told me about the new arrangement. Don't worry, I'll take good care of them." "Will you, Michael? How exactly do you plan to do that?" "Last I checked, your cryptocurrency venture wasn't exactly booming." He laughed. "I've got plans, big plans, but honestly, they don't need much. The house is paid off, thanks to you. They've got their retirement set up, thanks to you. Hell, they've even got that vacation condo in Florida, thanks to you." He paused. "Actually, I should be thanking you. You've made taking care of them pretty easy for me." Something in his tone told me he knew exactly what he was doing. This wasn't just my parents' decision. Michael had orchestrated it. All those years of living at home, having his expenses covered, he'd been playing the long game, positioning himself as the loving, present son while I was cast as the absent, money-obsessed daughter. "You've always been jealous of my relationship with them," he continued when I didn't respond. "You thought buying their love would work, but some things can't be purchased, Liv." That was it, the confirmation I needed that this was deliberate. My brother had manipulated our parents, exploited their old-fashioned values and expectations, and now he was gloating about it. "You're right about one thing, Michael," I said quietly. "Some things can't be purchased, like legal expertise, for instance, or knowing exactly how to freeze assets when fraud is suspected." "Fraud? What the hell are you talking about?" "Check the parents' accounts tomorrow. I think you'll find some complications." I hung up before he could respond, then sent one email to initiate the process Stephanie and I had prepared. Within hours, every account, property, and asset connected to my parents was legally frozen pending investigation. The family trust I had established and funded, frozen. The property management account for their Florida condo, frozen. Even their primary checking account, which I had been quietly replenishing each month, frozen. It was nearly midnight when my phone rang again. My father this time. "What have you done?" His voice was shaking, either with rage or fear, I couldn't tell. "What I should have done years ago," I replied. "I've protected my interests. We can't access anything. The bank says all our accounts are locked pending some sort of legal action." Yes, that's generally what frozen means. "This is outrageous. We're your parents. And I was your ATM for 15 years. I guess we're both experiencing a change in status," he sputtered, unable to form a coherent response to my newfound defiance. Finally, my mother's voice came on the line. "Olivia, surely we can discuss this reasonably. Whatever your father and I said, we didn't mean to upset you so badly." There it was, the backpedaling, the attempt to minimize what they had done. Not an apology, not an acknowledgement of their betrayal, just damage control now that they realized the consequences of their actions. "We can absolutely discuss this reasonably," I replied, "with our respective legal representatives present. I've taken the liberty of scheduling a meeting for next Tuesday at my office, 2 o'clock. Do try to be punctual." I ended the call and turned off my phone. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't at their beck and call. For the first time, I was the one setting the terms of our relationship. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Sleep eluded me that night, but it wasn't anxiety keeping me awake. It was clarity. All these years, I had been trying to earn something that couldn't be earned, Unconditional love from people incapable of giving it. The realization was painful, but necessary. Morning brought a barrage of messages from Michael, alternating between threats and desperate pleas. Apparently, he had promised our parents some grand lifestyle once he took control. And now he was facing the reality that he had nothing to offer them without my financial support. They can't even buy groceries, Liv. Is that what you want? For our elderly parents to starve? I didn't respond. Instead, I directed my assistant to send a modest grocery delivery to their house, enough to last until our scheduled meeting, but nothing extravagant. Just the necessities. It was more kindness than they deserved at that moment, but I wasn't trying to punish them. I was merely reclaiming what was mine: my money, my time, and my self-respect. The days before the meeting passed in a strange haze. I worked, I ate, I even managed to sleep a few hours each night, but mostly I prepared. James completed his financial report, documenting every contribution down to the last dollar. Stephanie refined our legal strategy, identifying which assets were undeniably mine and which would require negotiation. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I thought about what I wanted, not what my parents needed or expected, not what would keep the peace, but what would make me happy going forward. It was an alien concept, putting myself first. Tuesday arrived with an unusual sense of calm settling over me. I dressed with care, choosing a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without being overly aggressive. My office had arranged a conference room, water and coffee service, and security, just in case emotions ran too high. My parents arrived exactly on time, looking both indignant and uncertain. My father had always been an imposing figure in my life, his disapproval a weight I carried constantly. Now, he seemed smaller somehow, diminished by the reality that his control over me had been illusory all along. My mother, usually so composed, looked tired and worried. Michael skulked in behind them, avoiding my gaze. They were accompanied by a lawyer I recognized from the local bar association, Walter Green, a general practitioner who handled wills and simple estate planning. He was out of his depth, and we both knew it. Stephanie sat beside me, professional and prepared. James waited in my office, ready to present his findings if necessary. The power dynamic was unmistakable, and I could see my father registering it with growing discomfort. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. "I believe we have some matters to resolve." Walter cleared his throat. "My clients are understandably distressed by your actions, Miss Carter, freezing their accounts without warning." "Without warning?" Stephanie interjected. "I believe Ms. Carter received quite a significant warning when her parents informed her they were transferring all assets, many of which she purchased or maintained, to her brother, effectively disinheriting her after 15 years of financial support." My mother flinched at the word disinheriting. Perhaps they hadn't framed it that way in their minds, but that was precisely what they had done. "We didn't disinherit her," my father protested. "We simply decided that Michael would handle things going forward. Olivia is so busy with her career, we didn't want to burden her anymore." "How considerate," I said softly. "And did this consideration extend to discussing this decision with me before making it? Or to acknowledging the nearly $900,000 I've contributed to your lifestyle over the past 15 years? My mother gasped. "That can't possibly be right." James chose that moment to enter, carrying several bound copies of his report. He distributed them silently before taking a seat beside Stephanie. "It's all there," I said. "Every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every insurance premium, the cars, the vacations, the medical expenses not covered by insurance, even the monthly deposits into your checking account that I'm sure you attributed to careful budgeting of Dad's pension." My father opened his copy, his face paling as he flipped through the meticulously documented transactions. My mother's hands trembled as she did the same. This is extensive, Walter said, clearly unprepared for the level of detail we had brought. Ms. Carter has been exceptionally thorough in supporting her parents, Stephanie replied. As this report makes clear, many of the assets they attempted to transfer to Mr. Carter the Younger were either purchased entirely by Ms. Carter or have been maintained by her funds for years. Her legal interest in these assets is indisputable. Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. This is ridiculous. They're our parents. Of course she helped them out. That doesn't mean she owns them or their stuff. I turned to face my brother directly for the first time. You're right, Michael. I don't own them or their possessions. What I own is what I paid for. The Florida condo that I purchased in my name for their use. The cars that are legally registered to me. The trust that I established and funded. You did those things because you wanted to, my mother said weakly. Because you love us. Her words hit harder than I had expected. Yes, I had done it because I loved them. That was the cruelest part of all this, that they could so easily dismiss years of sacrifice that had been motivated by love. I did, I agreed. I did love you enough to support you, even when it cost me opportunities, relationships, and peace of mind. And how did you repay that love? By deciding I was a disappointment. By cutting me out of your lives the moment you thought Michael could take over. My father shifted uncomfortably. We didn't mean to hurt you, Olivia. We just thought it seemed like you were done with us. Always working, always too busy for Sunday dinners or holidays. I was working to support you, I replied, unable to keep the incredulity from my voice. Those 60-hour weeks paid for your lifestyle. Those missed holidays were spent on cases that allowed me to send you checks. Did you ever once consider that? The silence that followed told me they hadn't. They had simply taken and taken, never questioning where the money came from or what it cost me to provide it. Stephanie gently steered the conversation back to the legal matters at hand. We've prepared a proposal for moving forward, she said, sliding folders across the table. Ms. Carter is willing to release certain funds immediately to ensure her parents' comfort while we negotiate a fair division of assets based on contribution. Walter looked relieved at this concession. My parents exchanged glances before opening the folders. The proposal was fair, more than fair, really. I would retain ownership of the Florida condo, which had been in my name from the beginning, but they could continue using it for the next 5 years with appropriate notice. The newer of their 2 cars would remain mine, but the older one would be transferred to them fully. I would release their primary checking account from the freeze immediately, but would no longer make monthly deposits. Most significantly, I would cancel any claim to repayment of the documented $872,345 I had provided over the years. In exchange, they would sign an agreement acknowledging my ownership of certain assets and would not attempt to transfer or encumber those assets again. They would also agree to family counseling if they wished to have any relationship with me going forward. This seems generous, Walter admitted after reviewing the terms. It is, Stephanie confirmed. Ms. Carter could pursue repayment of funds or forced sale of jointly maintained assets, but she's choosing not to do so. My mother looked up from the paperwork, her eyes filled with tears. Why would you do this? If you're so angry with us, why not take everything? It was a good question, one I had asked myself repeatedly over the past week. The answer surprised even me when I realized it. Because I'm not like you, I said simply. I don't use money as a weapon or a measurement of love. I never did, Michael scoffed. Says the person who froze our parents' accounts. I froze the accounts to get your attention and to prevent further damage while we sorted things out legally. I corrected him. Not as a permanent punishment. There's a difference. My father hadn't spoken since receiving the proposal. Now, he closed the folder and looked at me. Really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. We made a mistake, he said quietly. We took you for granted. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I had expected. My mother reached across the table as if to take my hand, then seemed to think better of it. "Can we still fix this?" she asked. "Can we still be a family?" I didn't have a simple answer for that. The damage was profound, the trust shattered. But beneath the hurt and anger, there was still a flicker of that young girl who had just wanted her parents' approval. "That depends," I replied carefully, "on whether you're willing to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than what I can provide for you, on whether you're ready to see me as a daughter rather than a financial resource." "And what about me?" Michael asked, his tone defensive. "Where do I fit in this new arrangement?" I regarded my brother thoughtfully. He had been my parents' favorite, their golden child, for as long as I could remember. But he was also a product of their enabling, never pushed to achieve or contribute as I had been. "That's up to you," I told him. "If you want to be part of my life, you'll need to start taking responsibility for your own. No more schemes, no more living off others' work." He looked away, uncomfortable with the challenge. Walter cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take some time to review these terms privately?" Stephanie nodded. "That seems reasonable. We'll step out to allow you to discuss." As we rose to leave them to their deliberations, my father spoke again. "Olivia, regardless of what happens with these legal matters, I am proud of you." I should have said that more often. The words landed like a physical blow, both painful and healing at once. How long had I waited to hear him say that? And why did it have to come now, under these circumstances? "Thank you," was all I could manage before following Stephanie out of the room. In the hallway, she squeezed my arm reassuringly. "You're doing great. Remember, whatever they decide, you've already won by standing up for yourself." She was right. Whatever happened next, whether my parents signed the agreement, whether we managed to rebuild some version of a relationship, I had already achieved the most important victory. I had broken free from the cycle of giving without boundaries, of seeking approval that was always just out of reach. James joined us, his expression sympathetic. For what it's worth, I've seen a lot of family financial disputes, and most don't end with such generous terms. You're showing real grace here. Was it grace? Or was it simply that despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to leave them with nothing? Perhaps both. After 30 minutes, Walter appeared at my office door. They're ready to discuss the terms. When we returned to the conference room, the atmosphere had shifted. My parents looked subdued. Michael resigned. The folders sat open before them, the agreement pages on top. "We accept the terms," my father said. "All of them, including the counseling." I nodded, not quite trusting myself to speak. Stephanie efficiently guided everyone through the signing process, explaining each section as we went. When it was done, Walter gathered his copies and shook hands with Stephanie, exchanging quiet words about implementing the financial aspects of the agreement. As our legal representatives handled the details, an awkward silence fell among my family members. Years of unspoken grievances and misunderstandings hung in the air between us. "So what happens now?" Michael finally asked. "Now," I said, finding my voice, "we try to learn how to be a family without money being the primary connection between us. It won't be easy and it might not work. But if you're willing to try, so am I." My mother wiped away a tear. "I never meant for things to get so complicated. When your father got sick, I was so scared. You stepped in so capably that it became easy to rely on you. Too easy. And I let you," I acknowledged. "I thought if I just gave enough, did enough, you would finally—" I trailed off, not wanting to voice the childish need for approval that had driven me for so long. "We would finally love you as much as we love Michael," my father finished, surprising me with his perception. "Olivia, that was never the issue. We've always loved you both, just differently." "That's the problem," I said softly. The difference was that Michael got love without conditions, while I had to earn it by being useful. My brother shifted uncomfortably. I never asked to be the favorite. I know, I replied, and I meant it. This isn't really about you, Michael. It's about patterns that started long before you were even born. I was always going to be the responsible one, the achiever, the provider. You were always going to be the one who needed protection and support. Mother looked stricken. I never realized we were doing that. Few parents do, Stephanie interjected gently. That's why the counseling component of this agreement is so important. It gives you all a chance to recognize these patterns with professional guidance. After the documents were signed and copies distributed, we all stood awkwardly, unsure how to end this strange meeting. It wasn't quite a reconciliation, but it wasn't a complete severance either. We were in uncharted territory. The account freeze will be lifted by end of business today, I told my parents. You'll have access to your primary checking account again, but remember, I won't be making those monthly deposits anymore. You'll need to budget carefully on Dad's pension. My father nodded, a new humility in his expression. We'll manage. We always did before I started supporting them, before they became accustomed to a lifestyle beyond their means. The unfinished sentence hung between us. I could help with budgeting, Michael offered unexpectedly. I'm good with spreadsheets. I couldn't help the skeptical look I gave him, and he actually laughed. Okay, I'm terrible with money. We all know that. But I could learn, couldn't I? Maybe that's something I could bring to the table. It was a small thing, this offer, but it represented something significant. My brother acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that he needed to contribute something real. That would be helpful, I said, offering him the first genuine smile I'd directed his way in years. As they prepared to leave, my mother hesitated, then stepped forward and embraced me awkwardly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have seen what we were doing to you. I stiffened initially, then allowed myself to return the hug briefly. We'll work on it, I promised, not quite ready to offer full forgiveness, but willing to open the door to the possibility. After they left, I sank into my office chair, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. Stephanie perched on the edge of my desk. How are you feeling? She asked. Like I've just finished the most difficult case of my career, I admitted. And I'm not sure if I won or lost. Sometimes winning isn't about destroying the other side, she said wisely. Sometimes it's about establishing boundaries that should have been there all along. In the weeks that followed, those boundaries were tested repeatedly. My parents called, more often than they had in years, sometimes just to chat, sometimes with thinly veiled requests for financial help. I remained firm but kind, reminding them of our agreement and suggesting alternatives when appropriate. Michael surprised everyone by actually following through on his offer to help our parents budget. He even found a part-time job at a local tech store, not the entrepreneurial empire he had always dreamed of, but an honest living for perhaps the first time in his adult life. Our first family counseling session was awkward and painful. Old. Resentment surfaced quickly, with my mother growing defensive and my father retreating into silence. The therapist, Dr. Rivera, handled it skillfully, helping us identify the destructive patterns without assigning blame. Families develop roles for each member, she explained. Olivia became the achiever, the provider. Michael became the one who needed help. Your parents became the ones who received. These roles served a purpose once, but they're no longer working for any of you. By the third session, we were making progress. My father started talking about their finances openly, acknowledging how dependent they had become on my support. My mother tearfully admitted that she had favored Michael because he needed her more, while I had always seemed so self-sufficient. Thought you didn't need me, she confessed. You were always so capable, so independent, even as a child. I did need you, I replied, my voice breaking. Just not for practical things. I needed your approval, your attention, just you. It was a breakthrough moment, one that shifted something fundamental in our dynamic. For the first time, my mother seemed to truly see the wounded child beneath my accomplished exterior. Michael had his own revelation during our 5th session. "I resented you," he told me. "You were always so perfect, and I could never measure up. So I stopped trying. If I couldn't be the successful child, I'd be the one they worried about, the one who got their attention in other ways." Understanding my brother's perspective didn't immediately repair our relationship, but it helped. We began having occasional lunches without our parents, awkwardly building a connection that had never really existed before. 6 months after the freezing of the accounts, I received an unexpected call from my father. "I've been thinking about the Florida condo," he said without preamble. "I know legally it's yours now, but I'd like to offer to buy it from you. Gradually, of course." I was momentarily speechless. "Dad, you don't have to do that." "I know, but I want to. Your mother and I have been talking and, well, we don't feel right using something so valuable without contributing. Michael's been helping us save a little each month. It wasn't about the money. The condo was a minor asset in my overall financial picture now. It was about the principle, the recognition that they couldn't simply take from me anymore. We could work something out," I said carefully. "A nominal rent, perhaps." "That would be fair," he agreed, and I heard the relief in his voice. Around the same time, I met David at a charity gala. He was a pediatric surgeon with kind eyes and a quick wit. On our 3rd date, he asked why I seemed surprised when he called exactly when he said he would. "Let's just say I'm used to giving more than I get in relationships," I told him. "That sounds exhausting," he replied. "Maybe we could try something different." And we did. For the first time, I found myself in a relationship based on equality and mutual support. I didn't have to earn his affection through grand gestures or financial assistance. Being myself was enough. A year after the confrontation in my office, my parents invited me to dinner at their house. A much more modest house than they had lived in when I was supporting them, but comfortable and within their means. Michael was there with his girlfriend, a sensible woman who seemed to have no patience for his get-rich-quick schemes. After dinner, my father asked me to join him on the back porch. We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before he spoke. "Never properly apologized to you," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "for taking advantage of your generosity all those years, for not seeing what it was costing you." I looked at this man who had loomed so large in my childhood, whose approval I had sought so desperately. He seemed smaller now, more human, more real. "I accept your apology," I said simply. He nodded, blinking rapidly. "You know, when I got sick, I was terrified, not just of dying, but of failing your mother, of not providing. When you stepped in, I was grateful, but I was also ashamed. A father should take care of his children, not the other way around." "That's not always how life works," I said gently. "Sometimes children do need to help their parents, but it should be a mutual decision, not an unspoken expectation." "You've taught me a lot this past year," he admitted, "about boundaries, about respect. I'm just sorry it took freezing our accounts to make me listen." I laughed softly. "Well, I am a corporate attorney. Sometimes shocking tactics are necessary to bring people to the negotiating table." He chuckled, then grew serious again. "Are you happy, Olivia? Really happy?" I considered the question carefully. My life had changed dramatically in the past year. I had set boundaries with my family. I had started saying no to excessive work commitments. I had begun building a relationship with David based on genuine connection rather than what I could provide. Most importantly, I had stopped defining my worth by my usefulness to others. "I'm getting there," I answered honestly. "For the first time, I'm figuring out what I want instead of just meeting everyone else's expectations." He reached over and covered my hand with his. "That's all I've ever really wanted for you. Even when I was too blind to see that I was standing in your way." Inside, I could hear my mother laughing at something Michael said. It wasn't a perfect family reconciliation. We still had our moments of tension, our old wounds that would probably never fully heal. But it was real in a way our relationship had never been before. The next morning I woke early and drove to the beach, something I rarely took time to do, despite living just 30 minutes from the ocean. As I walked along the shore, I thought about the past year and all its painful revelations and unexpected gifts. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Dinner tonight? I'm cooking." I smiled and typed back, "Sounds perfect. I'll bring dessert." A second message came through, this one from Michael. "Thanks for dinner last night. Dad seemed really good. Better than I've seen him in years." I paused, then wrote, "I think we're all doing better." And it was true. We were all doing better now that the truth had been spoken, now that the unhealthy patterns had been broken. Money no longer defined our relationships. Love was no longer conditional upon usefulness. I looked out at the horizon, at the endless possibility of the ocean meeting the sky. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt light, unburdened, by expectations I could never fully meet. I had funded my parents for 15 years, and in the end, cutting them off had been the most loving thing I could do. For them, for my brother, and most importantly, for myself. The journey wasn't over. We would continue to negotiate the boundaries of our new relationship, continue to unlearn harmful patterns in therapy, continue to build something healthier. But for now, standing on the shore with the morning sun warming my face, I was content with how far we had come. I turned away from the ocean and headed back to my car, ready to embrace whatever came next. Not as the dutiful daughter or the family, ATM, but as Olivia, imperfect, deserving, and finally, truly free.